Shorty here. Thoughts and prayers going out to Dennis Prager, who took a very nasty fall a couple of weeks ago and seems to have been pretty much in a coma ever since. And here's my prayer, here's my concern. Do Dennis Prager's doctors at their fancy pants elite hospital, do they know about relief factor? Because surviving a nasty fall at age 76 and going through another round of back and neck surgery, I can only imagine how painful that must be. But in better times, Dennis Prager broadcasts from the pain-free Relief Factor, from the Relief Factor pain-free studio. So do Dennis Prager's doctors know about the miraculous round of back and neck surgery, pain-absorbing properties of Relief Factor? Now, you might be some kind of secular humanist, right? You might be into your facts and logic and your peer-reviewed studies, and you're probably being co-opted by the deep state, and you don't understand the miraculous healing power of Relief Factor. I just saw an ad for it on Fox News. I mean, they will ship it to you for the bargain price of just $18 a month. And I'm sure they'd be willing to send even some free Relief Factor to Dennis Prager's hospital, and they could just put it into his various drips. It's probably so much more effective than all that book learning medicine, all that science stuff that's been promoted by members of the deep state, right? Or the book learning, city slicker professors who've got their fancy antivirals, and they're probably even pushing the vaccine on the poor dude. Here he is, like it sounds like he's in a coma, and they're probably just forcing vaccine after vaccine onto him, and all these city slicker book learning drugs that have passed peer review, and the CDC and the FDA and all these deep state agencies. That's what they're inflicting on him, when he could be enjoying all the benefits of Relief Factor, right? If only he got the supplement, right? The supplement that he promotes on his show. He broadcasts from the pain-free Relief Factor studio. If only his doctors knew that Relief Factor was available to him, and so many other wonderful supplements that Dennis Prager promotes. Maybe they need to put some of that beet juice and all those other supplements that he promotes. Just put that into the IV drip along with the deep state vaccines and the store-bought book learning city slicker university verified, peer-reviewed, passed, deep state FDA, CDC medication. All right, why don't they allow him some of that that horse dewormer that's supposed to be really good against COVID? All right, I think that if you're a right winger and you make your living shilling supplements, all right, then you should have the full benefit of all these supplements that you have promoted during your stronger days. Like, why are Dennis Prager's doctors withholding Relief Factor from him? What's that drug for malaria and COVID that's controversial? That's horse dewormer, right? Are they giving him hydroxychloroquine? Are they giving him the Zelensky? Is it the Zelensky protocol? Zelensky protocol, right? Dennis Prager promoted the Zelenko protocol, right? So is Dennis getting any of the therapeutics that he has recommended on his show, or that he's had various people on his show to promote? Is he getting the full package that Joe Rogan would promote? I mean, you've got these doctors with their store-bought city slicker, book learning, university education, their peer-reviewed studies, their deep state medication. But Dennis Prager, he badly needs the Relief Factor and all the other supplements that he promotes on his show. Is he getting the Relief Factor? I mean, the man has just been through hell the past 2 weeks. I feel like the least you can do is give him some
while we're
relief
on the
factor.
subject of alternative influencers and pundits and this kind of thing, that some people on our subreddit or so on, they seem confused about like why on occasion we are more positive about destiny than some of the other, like, you know, online commentators. And they point out, like, don't you notice that he's unhinged and degenerate and whatnot? And I say to that, just listen to the episode where we highlighted those tendencies, right? And they continue apace. Like, but I did want to point out an example of why it is that I think, like, actually destiny is different than, say, a figure like Hassan, right? And here's a clip of him talking about the alternative media space and his place in it.
I say that like even I see you guys will post like, oh, Destiny does like hundreds of hours of research, or does like 8-hour streams on. Not really. We probably do like 1 to 3 hour streams reading stuff at the end. Maybe it's like a 6-hour stream if we're like super driven on some day. But for the most part, I don't even really do that much. And I'm already like ahead of every other independent media person in the world easily with the amount of research I do. Guaranteed, 100%. I'll put I'll debate anybody in the world on Jan 6th, and I know I'll win. I'll debate anybody in the world on vaccines, and I know I'll win. I'll debate anybody in the world on, I'll debate Mearsheimer on Russia, Ukraine, and I know I'll win. And it's not because I'm an ultra super intelligent person that just grasps every factor, and it's not because I do research. It's just because I read like a little bit, just barely, a little bit.
Yeah, here he goes promoting his book learning and his city slicker, degenerate homosexual ways. He's all into the academia and the Wikipedia and the deep state. Man, this guy could really do with some relief factor.
Okay, barely a little bit. I think I'm pretty exceptional in some ways, but like to be like the best in the world at what I do, I don't think I'm that exceptional. But the competition, the playing field is just so horrible. It's just, yeah, the standards in alternative media are non-existent. The bar is in hell, okay? The standards are non-existent here. And I hope that one day, it becomes a norm that you expect people to at least publish notes or have, I don't want to say have sources, because I don't believe anybody. When somebody cites a book, I don't believe it ever. I don't think they've ever read that book. I don't believe that people read books when they cite them, even when they quote them. I just don't believe it. I don't know if that means alternative media people should be forced to publish book reports every month, or if they should have some kind of note or just a stream where they're reading through an article or something. Like, it's ridiculous. Like Matt Walsh not knowing, Matt Walsh thinking after doing a whole documentary on trans people, thinking that 3 million people, that 3 million kids have been going through like hormone blockers. Like, the issue isn't that he misremembered a fact or he didn't know a thing. It's that it's an impossible amount of negligence to have gotten through an entire documentary and to have not known anything about. That's impossible. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, the standards here are non-existent. It's insane.
Yeah. So there, okay, to highlight the people.
Well, what about the standards where Dennis Prager is residing? All right. Do they know about the wonderful healing properties of Relief Factor and all the other supplements that Dennis Prager promotes? Why shouldn't he get the benefit of some good old Relief Factor?
The salient facts are, one, he's correctly identifying how low the standards are in alternative media, and this being a problem. And second, he is highlighting.
Well, what about alternative health? All right. What about the wonderful healing properties of Relief Factor? All right. Notice the wall of silence here in this video about the wonderful healing properties of Relief Factor and the other supplements that fund right-wing talk radio and right-wing media.
That he does put in more effort than the other commentators that he's engaged with, right? But that it's not that much. He's not saying it's Jordan Peterson, I've read 200 books on the topic and blah, blah, blah. He's saying it's, 1 to 3 hours reading articles and like, this is it. And he doesn't believe, like, at least streamers and alternative people when they claim to read.
Well, these academics and the fancy city slicker book learning ways, they don't have the good old-fashioned homespun ancient Aboriginal learning that I benefited from. Right, what the heck is going on with Kamala Harris and her latest video?
Onyx needs, Lee Zeldin's needs, and 17 cabinet members, and they're all still nominees. And this is before it gets heated when they start testifying in front of the Senate. Certainly, it's going to get personal. We've seen this before. Thanks so much, guys. Have a fantastic Thanksgiving. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, straight ahead, Trump is more popular than, you're welcome, more popular than ever. Just look at the polls. And Kamala, the vice president, well, she's trying her best to stay relevant.
What we did in 107 days was unprecedented.
Think about the coalition that we built, and we were so intentional about that. The best movements that are about progress in our country mean that it's leaders that we are dedicated to the coalition, a coalition where we bring people together.
I mean, does she ever sound authentic? Well, she did help bring a coalition together. Unfortunately for her, it was the Trump team that was brought together, as well as her supporters. She had a terrible record. She had a lack of a coherent policy, any of them. Heavily scripted, as you just saw. That was written down, and her appearances drove undecided voters to the right into Donald Trump's arms. All she has, in many cases, are recycled versions of her worst hits.
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
I have no idea what she's referring to. You lost an election. Who lost power? You lost power. Your voters are out of luck. But one thing you didn't hear from Kamala, her taking responsibility for the loss. And neither did her campaign or the officials who worked for the campaign. They blew through, get this, and they're proud of it, $1.5 billion with not a care in the world. And her aides shrug it off. Hey, that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Everything, of course, you can look at, did we get the best deal here? This was quite costly here. It's quite expensive. At the end of the day, though, I think if you look at the spend we had, the majority of the money we spent, it was to reach voters.
Oh, really? I thought. All right, so that makes it good. I would love to see those invoices, those receipts, and they have debt to pay off.
Okay, talking about Kamala Harris's rehab tour, that wasn't very nice, Fox News. Why are you spreading misinformation? All right, let's see what Mark Halperin has to say.
Her major donors, and one with her grassroots supporters. As best I can tell, I was not on either call because I was doing other things. She did not take questions in either one. On the first call with the donors, she was very upbeat, urged her donors to stay in the fight. She told them that her campaign in 107 days raised $1.5 billion into the campaign. We'll get back to that in a moment. Now, she spoke for about 9 minutes to her grassroots supporters. I watched the whole thing after the fact. We're going to play you a decent chunk of it. And just to be honest, if you believe that the vice president communicated effectively during the campaign after her original rallies in settings like this, in interviews and not in non-rally settings, then I think you'll love this performance. If you thought what she said was a bunch of meaningless word salad, I think you'll find this performance comforting if you like consistency. Again, you're not going to hear any news in this, but I think you'll find it quite striking, whether you're a fan or not, of Kamala Harris rhetorician. Play tape, please.
Look, this mission that we have, it takes hard work. But as you've heard me say many times, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And in doing our work, we will remain committed about building community, building coalitions, reminding people that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. We will be armed with the faith and the fuel that tells us what is possible and then drives us to achieve it. So let's continue to organize and mobilize and stay engaged. And I thank you all. I thank you all. We are all in this together. All right? We are all in this together. And on this practical eve of Thanksgiving, I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving with the ability and to find the ability at this moment to just remember there is so much to be thankful for. And so I wish for you that you are surrounded by the people you love and who love you. As you know, I encourage you to be around family in whatever way you compose that family, but to take a moment and just reflect on all the good you have done and all the good you have yet to do. We are powerful, those of us who love our country, and we got a lot of work to do. And with that, I will hand it over to Noel. Thank you all, and happy Thanksgiving from Doug and me and our family.
All right. I'm just going to let it speak for itself. That's her first, major statement since she got back off the trail and back from Hawaii. And again, I'm just going to let it speak for itself. But it's the holiday season. All I'll say is, well, I'm not even going to say it. All right.
Yikes. What the hell has all this been? I mean, what the hell? All right, she seems obviously drunk or something very close to that.
I mean, does she ever sound authentic? Well, she did help bring a coalition together. Unfortunately for her, it was the Trump team that was brought together, as well as her supporters. She had a terrible record. She had a lack of a coherent policy, any of them. Heavily scripted, as you just saw. That was written down, and her appearances drove undecided voters to the right into Donald Trump's arms. All she has, in many cases, are recycled versions of her worst hits.
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
I have no idea what she's referring to. You lost an election. Who lost power? You lost power. Your voters are out of luck. But one thing you didn't hear from Kamala, her taking responsibility for the loss. And neither did her campaign or the officials who worked for the campaign. They blew through, get this, and they're proud of it, $1.5 billion with not a care in the world. And her aides shrug it off. Hey, that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Everything, of course, you can look at, did we get the best deal here? This was quite costly here. It's quite expensive. At the end of the day, though, I think if you look at the spend we had, the majority of the money we spent, it was to reach voters.
Oh, really? I thought. All right, so that makes it good. I would love to see those invoices, those receipts, and they have debt to pay off, too. At least one of her senior advisors, David Plouffe, perhaps with the best reputation on the team, was honest enough to admit they were never in good shape.
I think it surprised people because there was these public polls that came out in late September, early October, showing us with leads that we never saw.
Really? Of course, there's one problem with David Plouffe being honest now. Look what he said in October about the campaign and the polling.
I think our data is consistent with what the public data is, which is it's a close race in 7 states. Obviously, a campaign like ours has a lot of sophisticated data. We look at this every day. We do quantitative research, qualitative research. But as we look at how 100% of the vote's going to get allocated in these 7 battleground states, we think we have an advantage over the Trump campaign.
At one point he wasn't telling the truth. You make the call at home. How can anyone ever trust these people again for the next Democratic, nominee? Still, the vice president has aspirations about running in 2028, but she's off to an extremely rough start. One DNC Finance Committee member said she was stunned by Kamala's self-congratulatory actions after the dumpster fire, which was her campaign. And one huge Dem megadonor, John Morgan, said this should be the end for her politically.
I think this disqualifies her forever. If you can't run a campaign, you can't run America. She cannot be trusted with the money.
Remember, she imploded before she got to one single caucus or primary back in 2020. Money was out of control, and her staff turned on each other. He's preaching to the choir in many cases. But if this week's postmortem from Kamala and her staff is any indication, they will ignore all the sound advice they're getting and go right back to do what they do best, as of late, and that is losing. Joining us now to expand on it, David Avella, chairman of GOPAC, and Matt Towery, a political analyst and pollster. Matt, when was David Plouffe really aware that I watched you talk, and you were saying Trump's in good shape, and they were saying, no, we're in better shape. Do you think he really knew they were in bad shape?
You know, you never really know, Brian. Sometimes these internal polls, you know, we don't ever get to test the internal polls. We get graded, the public pollsters, but the internal polls are done by pollsters who aren't graded. So I don't know what they were telling David or what they weren't telling him. What I do believe is it was pretty obvious that Donald Trump started to gain speed really after the second assassination attempt, then when J.D. Vance became vice president, and then he had these great podcasts Trump did. Trump was on fire. And here's my observation. Now looking back, I don't believe any Democratic candidate could have defeated Donald Trump. He was too strong. He had the eye of the tiger. He had a perfect campaign team that had fantastic ads and knew how to find these low propensity voters. I don't think any of these Democrats who were mentioned could have defeated Donald Trump in this particular year.
All right. Do you know about this Natalie Harp? She prints everything out for Donald Trump and follows him everywhere. She's absolutely devoted to him. So here we go.
You know, we all know the story about the Good Samaritan, but what you don't know is I was that forgotten person on the side of the road, the victim of medical error, the number 3 cause of death under the previous administration, and left to die of cancer. First, the medical establishment, they came by and they saw me there, so they wrote prescriptions for opioids and they walked on. Next, the political establishment, they saw me there. And they stopped just long enough to come over and tell me how to die, how to speed up my death so I could somehow die with dignity. But then an outsider, my Good Samaritan, President Donald J. Trump, he saw me there and he didn't walk by. He stopped. And for every single one of us, he gave up his own quality of life so we could live and work and fight with dignity, because he believes in survival of the fighters, not the fittest. And so, Mr. President, I have to say you have made a lot of promises to us, and you have kept every one of them. So now we're going to make you this promise. Just as you fought for us, forgotten America will never forget how you saw us on the side of the road, and you walked over, and you picked us up, and you made us great again. And now we're going to fight for you, Mr. President. God bless you.
Wow. Wow, she is absolutely devoted. All right, how did the Commentary Magazine crew react to that Kamala video?
30 seconds that changed the world. Released by the Democratic Party Twitter account, the Democrats, on TikTok and Twitter last night. A woman named Kamala Harris, you may have heard of her. I don't know if you're going to hear about much from her again, particularly after the 30 seconds that changed the world. Released a video telling people not to give up on their dreams, their power. Don't give up your power, and never let anybody tell you that you should give up your power. No power should be given up when power is to be had.
Simply describing what she said doesn't really do the video justice, because it's more,
it's a performance.
It's not just the banality of the words, it's the way in which the words are delivered on the video that our audience should definitely take a minute or less to watch.
Yes. Well, so we're not going to run it here because we don't know how to. I got to drop in the audio of it, and you have to look. You have to see it. It's only some people are watching on YouTube. She's drunk on her ass, people.
Whoa.
I mean, if she's not, then she's like having a stroke.
Or
she's either having a stroke,
sleep deprived. Maybe that's another.
I am sorry, but I and 50,000 other people on Twitter easily in the first 15 minutes of watching this 30-second video said, "Oh my God, she's drunk," and they released the video of her saying this thing, slurring her words, talking nonsense, argle-bargle,
and the gestures.
And the gestures and the leaning forward into the camera, and then
you feel a little bit more expansive,
Yeah, and she's almost like swaying like Otis the drunk in the jail cell in the Andy Griffith Show,
but while sitting.
She's swaying in a chair. Okay, am I being unfair? I think I'm not being unfair because so many people last night instantly had exactly the same reaction that I did.
You're not being unfair to say she certainly looks like she's hammered. Do we know if she's hammered? Of course we don't.
Well, I don't have a breathalyzer. I couldn't breathalyze her.
But the truth is, but here's
pull
the
her
thing.
over and make her walk a straight line.
We don't know when was this video recorded. Was it recorded during the past 2 weeks when she's been in Hawaii? And If so, was there like a room, had she just come off the beach, and she had a few Mai Tais too many? It's just like, let's talk about the campaign. Or is it something that she recorded when she just came back from vacation just the other day? In a meeting?
Right, she sounds absolutely toasted, absolutely hammered. Does she have a drinking problem? Does she have a benzo problem? What the heck is wrong with her? Why did the Democratic Party hoist this absolute train wreck of a candidate on us? Well, because they were too afraid of saying no to a putatively black woman. All right, she's about 25% black. She's 50% Indian Brahmin. She's about 50% white. But because of its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, they couldn't say, no, we are not going to hoist a drunk, alcoholic train wreck of a candidate on the United States because that would be racist. What the heck?
From an hour-long conversation. Most two ways are an hour long, and they're serious in substance. Our average view time on YouTube is over 20 minutes. That's a long time for most people in this current media environment. But it exists because, as you suggested, people want conversation. They want sophistication. They don't want to be dumbed down. And with respect to our friends in cable, a lot of cable is dumbed down. It's not as sophisticated as you'd hear if you went into a Manhattan bar or a Green Bay diner or a Colorado daycare center. It's more sophisticated. So whether you're talking about Joe Biden's acuity level or Donald Trump's lack of self-discipline, people want a real conversation about that. And they don't want it to just be elites. They want it to be a broader based conversation. And again, that's why I think we continue to grow pretty rapidly, because it's a unique product. It's not one way, it's two way, because people can talk to and back with people they see on TV, people whose work they read or who they hear on podcasts.
Time is always a factor, how much time people want to spend on something. But I think tone and substance is what I'm hinting at a little bit more. I talk a lot about how conversation is the cure, not just because it's alliterative, but the division has just gotten exhausting, right? We got Thanksgiving coming up and everybody's talking about who they're not inviting. And it just seems to me that just from a pragmatic standpoint, it seems like divisions kind of run its course. Like people can only get so angry, and that there is an emerging appetite to listen to people and talk with people you do not agree with.
Yeah, I would say you're absolutely right. Two ways pretty new. One of the most heartening things that's happened so far is we've had so many of our Harris voters say, I'm less upset than my friends who voted for Harris. And I'm less upset because I've listened here to long conversations with Trump supporters for months about why they were voting for Donald Trump. And they weren't white nationalists, and they weren't Nazis, and they weren't fascists, and they weren't people who wanted big tax cuts because they're rich. They're people who had problems with the Democratic Party and who saw in Donald Trump, what he had on offer, better solutions. So it's not about kumbaya, although I'm for that too. It's about understanding intellectually, emotionally, as Americans, why things seem so different to two different people. You and I both know so many people who can't imagine voting for Donald Trump. And I find it hilarious how many people I meet in Manhattan and Washington. I say, what friends do you have who voted for Trump? And they say, none. That's incredible. And they say, well, maybe I do. I just don't know. Well, if you do, you should find him and talk to them and try to understand, because he won. And even if he lost, I say this to people, and I said it during the campaign, Trump's going to get 47% of the vote. He might get 50, but he's going to get at least 47. You should be intellectually curious as an American as to why those people are about to do something that you say you can't imagine anyone doing.
Now, the answer...
Wasn't it a problem that the administration did nothing for 3 years about immigration? Or isn't it a problem that the president's mental acuity decline was so obvious and everyone around him said, we can't keep up with him, he's so sharp? They won't acknowledge it. And so I think part of the problem for the left is to say, we can't imagine really that everyone who voted for Donald Trump is a racist or fascist or bigot. It can't be true. So we need to think about whatever the percentage is who fit those descriptions, and it's not big. What were the other reasons?
People like you, Cuomo, you normalized things that Trump did that would be completely unacceptable. And
Trump does say many things that are unacceptable, that are terrible. The way that he challenged the 2020 election results and plunged the country into chaos and led tens of millions of people to think that the election had been fixed. All right. That was reprehensible.
Anyone else. One of my friends who's a big brain, very smart guy, said, no. It's not that people know what Trump is about and voted for him anyway. They don't accept how he is. They accept it. They rule it out of theirs. And that's because it's been normalized, and that's a problem. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I say all the time, the only thing harder than politically defeating Donald Trump is covering him as a journalist. He is very difficult to cover. It's impossible to not, to some extent, normalize him because of his skill and the rapidity with which he, the repetitiveness with which he does outlandish things, lies, belittles, breaks norms that are not proper to break. I don't mind breaking norms that are not improper to break. It's difficult because the first three letters of news are NEW. And on the 12th day he lies, it's very difficult to convince yourself as a journalist, well, he lied for day 12, so it's the biggest news of the day. It's a real challenge. And I don't minimize the complaints of those on the left who say, you do not call him out proportionate to the outrages. I don't minimize that at all. But what I also say is, you're the party of a conspiracy with the press to cover up the commander-in-chief of the United States' mental decline. That's a lot of normalizing. After he speaks to a dead congresswoman, you pretend it didn't happen. You make it a 2-day story and you never bring it up again. That's normalizing something that's super dangerous, more dangerous than Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And when Democrats want to say, what aboutism? Sure, no two situations are the same. I gave you one example of how Joe Biden is normalized. How about no press conferences? How about no interviews with the New York Times during the entirety of his term? How about normalizing that? How about normalizing, I could give it that as an example. So the point is, no one's covered perfectly. Trump is particularly hard to cover. But you cannot blame the press for undercovering Donald Trump. I think what you can blame the press for is for covering him so hard that you forced voters into the arms of Donald Trump. We had people on two-way throughout the year who said, I don't like Donald Trump. I've never voted for him. I voted for Biden last time. I'm voting for Trump this time because the press coverage of his legal cases, trying to keep him off the ballot, of the vice president of the United States, he's talking about normalization, saying that Donald Trump said good people on both sides, that Donald Trump said there'd be a bloodbath in America if he won. These are in her stump speech every day. They're falsehoods. They're lies. They're simply not true. I don't know if she knows they're not true or not. But again, you talk about normalization. That normalization produced votes for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that's the correct synthesis. The people, I know a lot of people who voted for Trump. I got a ton of shit for writing in my brother. I just believe it was funny how many people were upset about that. Of course, all on the left. The Trumpers don't care.
Okay, Stephen Miller, one of my favorite A's for Donald Trump, is on
Dean was
Fox.
Voted out by their people. They recalled him, and now Gascon got 30% of the vote in Los Angeles. They're changing gears, and now Musk is coming for them. Joining us now is Stephen Miller, incoming Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Homeland Security Advisor. Stephen, is Elon for real? Is he the right answer to take on these Soros-placed DAs?
Well, this is essential. The rule of law is the foundation of American democracy. It's the bedrock of our safety and prosperity. And Elon has very bravely and correctly identified this problem, where you have these Soros DAs, these Soros prosecutors, who have used the awesome powers they have to target political enemies, to target the opposition party. Of course, we've seen that weaponized ruthlessly against President Trump, while at the same time letting the worst violent offenders back on the street over and over again, and of course, shielding criminal illegal aliens and gang members from any consequences whatsoever. The American people are desperate to be freed from these radical lefty prosecutors who are turning their cities into nightmares of violence.
I mean, think about this. You have Alvin Bragg, who's letting the criminals run wild, going after Danny Penny, who has to stand up and act like a vigilante because he had to stop a would-be attacker, and he's being tried. And they're going after Trump while letting every criminal out. Yeah, he's up for re-election. Let's see if he can be targeted next. Steve, I want to move on, if I can, to what the president did yesterday. And he came out and said, hey, I don't like what's happening at the border in the north or the south. 25% tariffs on Canada, 25% on Mexico, 10% on China because of the precursors to fentanyl. Right away, Trudeau picks up the phone and says, let's talk this out. And right away, the Mexican president went to the microphone and says, I'm going to hit you back, America. But something just changed. As we're about to start this segment, on Truth Social, President-elect said this, that she had this conversation. She has agreed to stop migration through Mexico after picking up the phone and talking today was at Mar-a-Lago and into the U.S., effectively closing our southern border. He said we also talked about what can be done to stop the massive drug inflow and also U.S. consumption of these drugs. It was a very productive conversation. Is the president already making progress?
making more than progress. He's already delivering historic change, the change that he campaigned on months before he even returns to the Oval Office. For the last 4 years, and of course for decades before that, our leaders have sacrificed our people, our sovereignty, our security. They've let foreign nations and foreign countries and foreign cartels have their way with us. Donald Trump is reestablishing the principle, the doctrine of America first, of our national sovereignty and our national security. And he's rebuilding a cooperative, collaborative relationship with Mexico in which we make clear to them that we can have incredible projects and incredible future together, but you must stop the flow of illegal immigration into our country. Under the previous president, we had to remain in Mexico, we had the Mexican military on our border, and we had massive enforcement when Donald Trump was in office. And of course, Joe Biden let that all go away, and we've seen the results. With President Trump's diplomacy, we are now seeing a historic commitment from Mexico to stop the invasion of over 150 different nations that are using Mexico as a transit country. Remember, this is not Mexican illegal immigration. This is illegal immigration from 150 different nations, including terror hotspots, including foreign adversaries. And this is an example, a powerful example of why the American people sent Donald Trump back to the White House, so that he could defend our interests and secure our borders.
Stephen, isn't it pretty amazing the difference it feels from 2016 and now here we are in 2024? It seems like people understand the world is coming to alignment, almost preparing for Trump instead of fighting against him. Do you feel that difference?
Everyone can feel that difference, waking up every morning knowing now that we have a president-elect, a soon-to-be 47th president, who every single day is thinking about how can I defend American interests, how can I protect American families, how can I secure American sovereignty, and the whole world knows it. Look, every bureaucrat around the world, every foreign leader around the world, every foreign parliament around the world, from Brussels all the way to Bangkok and everywhere in between, understands that America once again has a leader who will put our interests first, and that includes making sure that every single country in the world is a participant in the restoration of our national sovereignty and the repatriation of the criminal lawbreakers who do not belong here.
Stephen, real quick, Politico is reporting that Mark Zuckerberg was at Mar-a-Lago today meeting with President Trump. Can you confirm that?
Yes, that's correct. And Mark Zuckerberg has been very clear about his desire to be a supporter of and a participant in this change that we're seeing all around America, all around the world with this reform movement that Donald Trump is leading. Mark Zuckerberg, like so many business leaders, understand that President Trump is an agent of change, an agent of prosperity. Right. And so business leaders, CEOs, everywhere, they want to be an element, a supporter, a booster of making our economy prosperous, delivering for American workers, and making sure that America is the most powerful, wealthiest, freest nation on the face of the earth. So we'll see what comes of that. And Mark, obviously, he has his own interests, and he has his own company, and he has his own agenda, but he's made clear that he wants to support the national renewal of America under President Trump's leadership.
Okay, some good news there. I like what Stephen Miller has to say. Very effective operator behind the scenes. Get a little bit more here from Mark Halperin and company.
Who also don't love who's telling them how bad Trump is. I think that's part of it also.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with what you said. There's one exception, which is convincing tens of millions of people that the election was stolen in 2020. I consider that to be egregious and of a magnitude of destruction to our democracy that may be unmatched in the last 30 years. Outside of that, I can point to things that Democrats did that, again, it's hard to argue that they've got clean hands.
And look, I would have no problem saying back to you, well, then other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Absolutely.
He disqualified himself.
It's egregious.
And I agree. I have said many times here, News Nation, anywhere else, I think Trump has disqualified himself from consideration for president of the United States. That's my call, not yours, not what I have to do for the audience. I got to be fair. So when you look at this election, even though I would suggest that Democrats should have been able to beat Trump in this election, especially when you look at how the polls weren't really off. They just lost every close call that there was in the Electoral College. What is your take on what the lessons are for the Democrats?
Well, I think there's some idiosyncratic things. Joe Biden should never have run. He really shouldn't have run in 2020, but he certainly shouldn't have run for election. And she shouldn't have run. When Joe Biden called her and said, I'm not going to run, maybe, she should have said, you know what, I'm not going to run either, because I can evaluate my capacity to beat Donald Trump in 100 days, and I'm not the right person. There may not be someone better, but I know it's not me.
Why? Why should she have thought that?
Well, not because she's a woman, and not because she's not white, and not because she shouldn't be ambitious, because she should know herself as well as I do in terms of knowing her. And I don't know her all that well. I've known her a long time. She's not good at making difficult choices under pressure. That is the job description of president and presidential candidate. And she should have said, this is going to require a lot of very difficult decisions about how to talk about the Biden-Harris record. The biggest vulnerability Joe Biden had, besides his loss of acuity and his age, was our failed record. Anyone else isn't going to have to defend the Biden-Harris record. Maybe Pete Buttigieg would a little, but not the same way. And she should have said to herself, I think, I'm not good at making difficult choices under pressure. And trying to figure out how to explain why the country should vote for me as part of an administration where they think the country's on the wrong track is going to require making a lot of difficult decisions under pressure. And I shouldn't do it. That's what I think she should have done. So those are two lessons. He shouldn't have run and she shouldn't have run. I think the bigger issue, and people say it's economics, it's this, it's that. Ronald Reagan talked about a three-legged stool. One leg was national security, one leg was economics, one was social cultural. I think the Democratic Party has allowed Donald Trump to take the majority position on all three legs.
Right. Those are some great points. All right. Kamala Harris should have known that she was a terrible candidate, that she was not up to even the campaign, let alone to governing. And Donald Trump took the centrist majority position on these three key areas: defense, economy, cultural issues.
Now, national security has flipped from the Reagan days because now the dominant position is end the forever wars. But I think she got caught up in the forever wars and being tagged with that. Two, economics, inflation, obviously, but also an economic theory of the case. It wasn't really discussed very much by the press, but Joe Biden had brought the economy back by spending a ton of money and having all these government programs. A lot of Americans don't like that. And then on the cultural stuff, yes, abortion, better for the Democrats. But some of these other issues, trans, immigration, which is also, of course, an economic issue, the Democrats let Donald Trump become a centrist. I would say the biggest failing of the media in covering Donald Trump, and it lulls the Democrats into this, of all the failings. They say he's just appealing to his extreme MAGA base. Well, it turns out the extreme MAGA base is 50% plus. Okay, the extreme MAGA base, yes, a lot of what he talks about, including the dog whistles, appeals to people who consider themselves MAGA. But on the three-legged stool, stop the forever wars, deal with inflation, close the border, more energy production, less regulation, no trans athletes in women's sports. On all those issues, Donald Trump is not appealing to the extreme MAGA base. He's appealing to the center. And so the lesson for the Democrats is figure out that, in fact, you've moved so far to the left on all three issues that you can't compete even against someone as unpopular as Donald Trump. And how are you going to have positions on those three legs that are, in fact, more appealing to the American people?
Do you think if it wasn't Trump, it was Haley, that she would have won and by more?
No, I think she would have lost.
Had to be Trump.
Didn't have to be. It just,
and that was just such a media trope that Nikki Haley would have been this great candidate. All right, let's get Kip back onto the show. Kip, what's going on?
Hey, buddy. I prefer the fact that Trump is going to be president for the next 4 years, but can I push back a little bit on the 2020? You shitting on him a little bit for 2020, his role during the 2020 fiasco?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know, bro. I think they made it way too easy for the Dems to rack up those 81 votes. Whatever safeguards, they used COVID excuses or whatever. And I say this to you, Luke, you're going to know a lot more of the details on that specifically because you're a news hound. But it just seemed like if you saw how many votes they had been getting in previous elections and how many votes they got again in this election, you can see how they made it real easy to tack on 5 or 6 needed million Democrat votes, and especially in places like Fulton County, Georgia. It just seemed like something was fishy there. And then not just that, Luke, I would just say that was the first point. The second point would be those 51 liars who misled the whole country. I believe 17% of Democrats said they wouldn't have voted for Biden if they had known the truth about his son, and the fact that laptop was legitimate. So the media played some role there. And then I would say that the third point I would try to make on that would be that everybody that tried to step in and mount defenses in whatever states, I don't know if they were harebrained, premises that they were mounting them on, but they all got shit on. They all got everybody. They came after them. They tried to come after all their careers. So they were made an example of. Can you speak to those 3 points? Did I make?
I got them. So there's nothing mysterious about Joe Biden's vote total in 2020. There was a 2% swing against Donald Trump in the suburbs, and it happened virtually all across the country. There was a similar 2% swing against Donald Trump in the 2018 midterm elections. So there was nothing particularly suspicious about vote totals. There are some Democratic strongholds, there are Republican strongholds, but overall there was just a 2% swing in the suburbs against Donald Trump. Now, there were 51 intelligence officers who said that they suspected that the Hunter Biden laptop, it bore all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, and you suggest that this might have changed 17% of Democratic votes. It didn't. You could come up with some poll, but the idea that a pronouncement by a bunch of intelligence analysts would shift 17% of the Democratic votes, there's no way that happened. Yes, the news media presents a distorted view of the world. I present a distorted view of the world. You present a distorted view of the world. We all have a distorted view of the world, but we all tend to be pretty good at making choices to maximize our own interests. So the world out there is incredibly complicated, far more difficult to understand than we can possibly master with our own individual brains, but we will tend to think more clearly and have more clarity when we talk things out socially, publicly, when we work together and go back and forth, then we'll get more clarity. But the
Yes.
idea that 51 people saying this is a hallmark of Russian disinformation and the news media pushing that and social media discouraging the sharing of that information, that didn't make the difference. Donald Trump had the 2020 election in the bag. He just ran such an incompetent campaign. He governed in what appeared to be such an incompetent way that he cost himself the 2020 election, and he could have screwed up again in 2024. Luckily, he had a far more disciplined operation, and he saw the severity of the challenge in front of him, that if he didn't win the election, he'd likely spend the rest of his life in prison. But the way he ran in 2020 was incompetent and reckless, and the result was not surprising. Now, in this election, the turnout was about the same in the battleground states. In the states that weren't up for an election, really, because the outcome was already foreseen, the turnout was considerably reduced. But where the battleground states were, where you had votes that really mattered, the turnout was about the same as 2020.
Yeah. Again, I'm glad he's there to be their nightmare for the next 4 years. They deserve this nightmare. They deserve it and then some. But by the same token, Luke, the people interjected so many harebrained schemes. The COVID thing shut the country down and gave everybody a chance to step out of their patterns and go to whatever new patterns they do. And it's gonna be a big hurdle to try to unroll that, because I think we had a series of circumstances that maybe we hadn't seen, and since maybe the early 20th century, when, like I told you before, film and radio came on the scene and kind of mesmerized everybody. I think COVID kind of changed everybody around their ways of being so much that, he's got a lot of work to do to unroll what was done during that period. You hear what I'm saying, Luke?
Yeah, without COVID, he would have rolled to an easy re-election. But he appeared so haphazard and talking about harebrained schemes. Donald Trump talks about all sorts of harebrained schemes, from the bleach to get rid of the COVID. I mean, he comes up with more than his share, and his supporters come up with more than their share of harebrained schemes. It's not like it's something that's just a phenomenon of the left.
Right. I've never really checked into the QAnon stuff, but it's out there. You know what I mean? It's out there in the way that MSNBC is out there. Maybe even more so than MSNBC. But with Thanksgiving looming tomorrow, I had to really kind of be a shithead today when my mom's live-in or boyfriend, whatever you want to call her, She invited me to Thanksgiving tomorrow, and I had to let him know that I'm coming Friday. And he was like, I would rather you come tomorrow. I'm bringing turkey. My daughter's bringing ham. I'm like, but I'm coming Friday because Mom wants a kitty cat. So I've got to take her to the shelter on Friday. You could just cook me up some leftovers on Friday. Am I just a bad person? Tell me, Luke.
Yes, you're just a bad person.
It's 161 miles round trip, Luke.
You're just a bad person, Kip.
I was there last Saturday. I'm going to be there this Friday. I'm going to be there next Saturday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like a wart they can't get rid of, but he really wanted me to be there on Thursday. And I've been telling him since last Saturday, don't go to any big production on my account, because I told him it's hard to justify a 161-mile round trip because the ribbon of freeway I have to go down, it's not dependable. It'll leave you stranded there, twirling your thumbs for 45 minutes if you catch it at the wrong time. So anyway,
can't you just stay there overnight and you can deepen your bond with this man?
Oh my God. He's older than my mom, and she's old as dirt. I don't know, Luke.
Think about all the wisdom that he could share with you, bro.
Oh man. Well, since we are getting close to the season, I was going to ask you about Kwanzaa and see if you had anything over the top this year, or you were just going to celebrate Kwanzaa kind of. How was the 40 household?
I'm not. I'm lucky that I belong to a traditional Jewish community because I'm not naturally a big celebratory guy. I just love getting up every morning and doing my exercises and listening to all the podcasts and the lectures and the audio books that I want to listen to as I get limber and free, and then go for a nice long walk. I usually walk for about an hour or so every morning, listening to everything that I want to hear. And to me, that's glorious. And if it's I don't have to work, then I've got 8 hours to read. So I'm lucky I belong to a community because then there are communal celebrations, and I by osmosis, by simply participating with my community, I get to celebrate things. But otherwise, I am so similar to you. Like I would rather not be stuck at a meal if it's not going to be interesting. I don't particularly enjoy the company of most people. And so I am, in my discretionary time with other people, I tend to be highly selective, except I will go to sports bars and just hang out with people and meet people, because then you don't know. You can't really optimize that. You can meet fascinating, interesting people, or it can be just a complete wash. But in general, I'm highly discriminating. I will not put up with boring people. I will not be stuck at a boring meal. I will make an excuse and just get the heck out of there.
Yeah, I become sort of like a ghost. It's like my internal clock is counting down from 30 minutes from the time I put my fork down. And it's like there comes a point where everybody's like, where'd Kip go? Kip was here right here. We're watching the football game. Where'd he go? And my ex or whoever would have to say, he's gone. He's gone. You'll see him. Christmas will be here soon. He'll be back, So I was sort of like a ghost. I became a ghost about 30 minutes after the meal was over. And I was also going to get your opinion on these White House Christmas videos that we've been seeing out of the Biden administration for the past couple of years. They could be described as gay or gayer each year. So what can we expect for this year's Christmas celebration?
I've never paid any attention, so I don't really have a clue.
Okay. I was going to say you are absolutely right. I was detecting the sarcasm in the bit about Prager and the whatever it was, ready-made vitamin or whatever. But I was saying that you should take that a step further. There should be Prager MDs working on his ass. That's right. And find some way to marry all these people that do the supplements and the gold schemes and the emergency foods and the pseudo institutes. Somehow we got to find a way to marry these people to this horse shit that they peddle, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I just
Okay.
looked that up. That's great. I love it.
But I was also gonna, on more of a somber note, you like to give like tales of maybe how things we can watch out for. Uh, I told you back, I had a best friend named Ray, and I told you back when I was a kid that a fella came up to me by the name of Detective Clyte from the police department, and he had a whole laundry list of shit he was accusing me of doing. And so, I don't know, within a very short period of time, I was off to the Marines. Well, you don't just go like off to the Marines, you have to go take tests and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, I talked to my friend Ray. I told him, hey, buddy, your name wasn't on the outside of that file jacket that he brought with him, but it was sure as hell on the inside of that file jacket. So I think maybe I said, your brother's a Marine, right? Maybe we should just go be a Marine too. It's time. So anyway, we went off, and you had to take something that was kind of like an SAT or an ACT. They call it an ASVAB in the Marines. And I'd be damned if Ray didn't cheat off me for the first, at least third, maybe half of that long ass test. And somehow when they posted the scores, he still only scored like in the 34th percentile, which meant, I don't know, he wasn't cut out for anything much more than, say, artillery or whatever. So we kind of got separated once we got done with boot camp, kind of got separated, and he went his way, and I went over to work on cipher machines and do what they wanted me to do. So he ended up getting a medical discharge, Luke, and then I don't know. He started like wanting to live like above his station. Now, the thing you ought to know about Ray is he lived right next door to a trailer park. And I'm not here to shit on all trailer parks, but he lived next to the kind to where they all had like the kind of knowledge that only a convict out of prison knows. You ever seen those type of places, Luke?
Yes.
Where everybody knows the wrong kind of stuff. Well, his house butted right up next to the wrong kind of trailer park. And we lived the kind of existence to where it was nothing for he and I to be driving around a hot wired car. And that kind of stuff became normal. So I kind of got desensitized that because we sort of kind of destroyed everything in our path, and it's kind of where you just progress to the point to where you've really gotten to the point where you got to go off to the Marines. Well, anyway, he didn't like the Marines. It was too structured for him. So he got him a medical discharge, and he ended up, like I say, he got a little above his station. He had like a daycare, and he had like a little flooring store where he was selling like flooring. And he wanted a couple of BMWs or whatever. And I guess it all became too much because I just remember him stopping by. I was running a bank at the time, and he stopped by at one point and had said something about somebody was going after him. Did I have a gun? And, I know better than to give somebody a gun with my name attached to it. I'm like, no, I don't have an extra gun. Sorry. But he ended up getting him an extra gun. And sometime within the next, I don't know, 60 days, his wife went missing. Her name, just for shits and giggles, it was Paula Burnette was her name. And his name was Ray Burnette. And
Brunette, B-R-U-N?
Burnette, B-U-R-N-E-T-T.
And is she still missing?
Oh, yes, still missing. But, okay. So I see, this is like 1997, by the way. Mm-hmm. And so I start seeing everywhere I go, all the little 7-Elevens, and everywhere I'm going, I'm seeing these little wanted signs. It's her. And the story, he and his mama, I call her Chico. She worked at the Kmart. So I walked to the Kmart to say, Chico, what's going on here? Why do I keep seeing all these wanted signs? And he was just saying that, Chico was saying that she had went back to Virginia or wherever she is from, that she had went back to to Virginia, and I guess didn't like being a mama or whatever. But that story wasn't holding no water because it was her parents that was putting all those signs up. You get what I'm saying? They had come down from Virginia or wherever, putting up all these wanted signs. Anyway, so my brain, as it's processing what the hell's going on there for about 30 or 45 days, some bitch makes the evening news. He's taken the bank manager of the bank right around where he and I lived and had grown up. He's taken the bank manager hostage. He's
what's his name again?
Ray Burnette. He went by Ray, but Donald Ray Burnette, Burnette. He had taken the manager hostage and then subsequently took the family of the manager hostage just so she could be turned loose to go get all the money out of the bank. It's what you call a copycat crime. Some guy up in Knoxville had been doing that, and I guess it seemed like a good way to fix his problems or whatever. So anyway, long story short, they caught up with him somewhere, Georgia, Florida, wherever, got most of the money, probably 90% of the money or whatever. And he ended up catching like a 39-year hitch for that. And they had this, they had this like warm and fuzzy feeling in the world around 2020, 2021, where they started letting all the jailbirds free. And he was one of the ones, I think, that got let free around 2021, maybe 2022. But at the same time, she's still missing. Those things, those just don't magically go away because it's 25 years old or whatever. So who knows? But, I got to thinking, because you and I are about the same age, just imagine, man, getting being put away in 1997, and you're behind bars until 2022, Luke Ford, 2022.
Yeah. Yikes.
That's crazy, but that's just trying to live above his station. I guess he thought, hey, man, everybody should have a daycare for his old lady, and everybody should have like a floor tile business. And then, whatever, maybe the economy turned or whatever. I don't know exactly what had happened, but, the pressures of life got to him. And next thing you know, she comes up missing. He's robbed a bank. Oh, man, it just not a good thing.
Okay, but that's anyway, a cheery story to take into Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and just because it's November and because I live up here next to the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, it's 125 years ago since they pulled off what I think is the greatest football feat ever. Now we're talking about a time to where they just ran the ball. It was 1899, but they finished 12-0, and they scored 320 points and only had 10 points given up. And we're so far out in the boonies here that basically almost all their games were road games. So the way the trainer would set up the games back in those days, the trainer/manager would set up the games, and they set up a trip to where they got on a train and left the Mountain Goat. That's what our railroad up here was called. And they went down to Texas. And on the first day, they played the Texas Longhorns and shut them out in their own place. Shut out Texas in their own place.
Wait, this is the University of Tennessee?
No. This is the University of the South in Sewanee. The Iron Man. Yeah. This was 1899. They got on that train. This is before cars. They got on that train and went down to Texas and whipped those Longhorns' ass, shut them out. And then they took the train the very next day to Houston or wherever and beat Texas A&M. Shut them out. And then they got on the train and the very next day played Tulane in New Orleans, shut their ass out, and then took the day off in New Orleans and partied, and then went the next day to LSU in Baton Rouge and shut them out, and then took the train up to Memphis the next day and beat Ole Miss, shut them out, and then and the only team that scored the 10 points on them was John Heisman's Auburn Tigers. So
Okay.
you ever heard of the Heisman Award? That's the most outstanding football player. So anyway, that's 125 years ago this month. So a little bit of history there for you. That's all I had.
Bro.
Thanks
Thanks
for
bro.
being with your time, buddy. See you.
Talk to you later. Bye. Okay, so I hope Dennis Prager is getting all the supplements that he needs. All right, what do we got here? The same nerve support formula that helped Dennis Prager eliminate his nerve pain. Introducing Nerve Renew, the doctor-recommended formula that fortifies nerves for lasting relief. Like, someone should be notifying Dennis Prager's doctors about Nerve Renew. Do these city slicker, book-learning, peer-reviewed doctors even know about the miracles that are found in Nerve Renew? It's comprehensive, man. It's formulated to not only reduce discomfort, but also to support nerve regeneration and bolster nerve function. Does not Dennis Prager need some Nerve Renew right now? It provides fast and effective relief from nerve-induced discomfort or weakness, allowing you to regain control and enjoy life pain-free. Dennis Prager needs Nerve Renew. Will someone please notify his doctors about Nerve Renew? And then Rough Greens. Is Dennis Prager getting his Rough Greens premium nutritional supplement? It's got vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, probiotics, and digestive enzymes. We bring your dog's food to life. But I'm sure it'd be good for Dennis Prager as well. All right, here are all the advertisers on the Dennis Prager Show. Balance of Nature. I hope his doctors know about Balance of Nature. You can easily get 31 fruit and vegetable ingredients with Balance of Nature. I see this all the time on Fox News. Discover why hundreds of thousands of people just like you choose Balance of Nature fruit and veg. This is so important. Do the doctors who are treating Dennis Prager, do they know about Balance of Nature? What about Dinovite? Right? It will balance your pet's gut. It tackles itching, paw licking, weak immune system, hot spots, and allergies. Just one nutritional supplement. You can get 10% off your first order. I'm sure that would help Dennis too. I hope he's got a MyPillow supporting his head right now. His Nerve Renew and Relief Factor. And what about Riduzone? Riduzone, that sounds... New discovery helps fight food cravings. It supports a healthy weight. It's a non-stimulant naturally present in the body. Vegetarian, gluten-free, non-GMO, patented, FDA-accepted supplement. Tired of losing weight? So I hope Dennis Prager's doctors know about Riduzone. It's for metabolic wellness. I mean, how is Dennis going to overcome the obstacles that he's facing right now without Balance of Nature and Riduzone and Dinovite? And then let's not forget the wellness company, right? They offer healthcare without the propaganda. I mean, this is so important, right? You know about the wellness company, right? It is healthcare without the propaganda. I hope Dennis Prager's doctors know about the wellness company. What's he doing in some deep state hospital with city slicker book learning doctors and their peer review medication when he should be in the trusty hands of the wellness company, right? Did Dennis Prager have this medical emergency kit when he fell? Right? If you check out, all right, you save $30 at checkout with the code word Prager. All right? Just put in Prager. It's peace of mind for the unexpected. Don't get caught unprepared. This gift should be in your medicine cabinet. Right? You could potentially save thousands avoiding the ER line if Dennis Prager only had this when he fell. Right? 8 life-saving prescription-only medications. All right? Treat over 30 common diseases, including amoxicillin, clavulnate, and ivermectin, which are frequently in short supply. Right? 10% off and early access. Right? If only he'd had this when he fell, right, he could have benefited from the wellness company medical emergency kit. It includes antibiotics, right? They could have combated bacterial. Do his doctors even know about this stuff? They're using all this city slicker book learning, peer reviewed, university promoting deep state medication when he could be getting this fair dinkum supplementary help from the wellness company. It's a medical emergency kit. It's just great for when you break your back and your neck. Anti-inflammatory, right? You know how inflamed Dennis Prager has gotten since breaking his neck and his back and having neck and back surgery again for like the 5th time, right? I hope his doctors are giving him these anti-inflammatory supplements, right? They reduce inflammation. They provide relief from pain and swelling, and they treat arthritis and injuries like breaking your back and your neck. And then, is Dennis getting all the antifungal that he needs right now? You got to treat fungal infections by inhibiting their growth. Do Dennis Prager's city slicker doctors even know about this stuff? Right? These drugs are used to treat conditions like fungal yeast infections, vaginal candidiasis, oropharyngeal candidiasis, oral thrush. Think about all the fungal infections that Dennis Prager is vulnerable right now, hanging out in this deep state hospital, right? And then there's the first aid emergency kit, the travel emergency kit. Stay connected with the wellness company. So important, right? Jigsaw Health, right? It's fun to feel good. Dennis Prager needs to feel good right now. It's the Black Friday sale. Do his doctors even know that they could save 15% on any order over $100 plus free shipping? I mean, he could get some calming magnesium powder. I mean, Dennis Prager badly needs some calming magnesium powder right now with broken back and broken neck and all that surgery, right? And you could get electrolytes. Do Dennis Prager's deep state doctors even know about the healing power of electrolytes? I mean, these are top-rated, best-selling products. Someone needs to notify Dennis Prager's doctors about Jigsaw Magnesium, Jigsaw MagSooth, Jigsaw Electrolyte Supreme. This product, all right, it hydrates, energizes, and replenishes, and it supports healthy muscle tone and function. Right, Dennis Prager's lying in a hospital, in a coma. He needs healthy muscle tone and function. If only the doctors would put some Jigsaw adrenal cocktail with whole food vitamin C. It supports a balanced response to stress. You don't think falling and breaking your neck and breaking your back is stressful? Right? He's lying here in a coma. He needs steady energy production, and it's very easy to feel bloating. So if he just took this Jigsaw adrenal cocktail with whole food vitamin C, it could really help him reduce the old bloating. Wow, Ben Greenfield recommends this. It's a key part of his evening routine. And Dr. Weiss, he's a naturopathic cardiologist. I hope Dennis Prager is getting treated by naturopathic neck and back doctors. And Emily Park, Dr. Emily Park, founder of Arizona Wellness Medicine. She says, my patients love Jigsaw Health products, and so do I. I just hope Dennis is getting the adrenal cocktail. That would be so important for him right now. Do his doctors even know about these things? I'm just afraid that they don't. Is your child getting enough vitamin N? All right, that's about no. Dennis, I've been talking about Relief Factor for 2 years. All right. All right, Dennis Prager says, I've been talking about Relief Factor for 2 years. My wife was taking it for a knee pain. It worked for her. Then I decided to try it after I had inflammation from some of my workouts. Worked for me too. It's the only product of its kind that I've ever endorsed. Click below for our special offer and see for yourself. Do Dennis Prager's deep state doctors even know about the power of Relief Factor? Man. And the rough greens. Bloody deep state trying to hide the power of supplements from Dennis Prager. He needs a naturopathic doctor stat. He needs the wellness company. Bloody hell.
Running for, you know this well, running for president is not as easy as it looks. And these people like Gretchen Whitmer or Governor Newsom or Governor Murphy or Ron DeSantis, like just being a governor or just being a senator and having some presence on the national stage does not mean you can build the aircraft carrier, raise $2 billion, have issue positions, hire the people, go on different media. It's not as easy as it looks. And I think if you look at Nikki Haley's performance, look at Ron DeSantis's performance, look at Gretchen Whitmer's performance, I can't tell you that they'd be good. Donald Trump was 1 for 2. Now he's 2 for 3. That's Hall of Fame, batting average.
Mm.
And until you prove you can do it, my assumption from watching many people try and fail, you can't do it.
That's interesting, because I had been wondering, Trump is so unpopular. There's so many people who really didn't want to have to vote for him. I mean, just think about it. All the campaigns that you and I have covered, the idea, imagine the proposition being like, God, I really don't want to have to vote for this person, but I think I have to. I mean, that is a very unusual standard for people, Usually it's like a 50-plus split,
and it makes it easy to say, if it had been Nikki Haley or any other Republican, they would have won easily. I don't know what states they would have won that Trump didn't win. I don't think Nikki Haley was going to win New Jersey. And again, it's like an athletic competition. They're not played on paper. This is why people who do these models, these political models, who know nothing about either campaigns or politics, are playing at a level of abstraction that I think makes their models silly. It's about the blood, sweat, and tears and the guts. I'll personalize it. Your dad was an incredible politician. He was an incredible governor, incredible civic leader. He toyed in 1992 with running, had a plane on the tarmac, ready to fly him to New Hampshire. He might have been spectacular, but we'll never know because he never tried. And it's not the same as anything else.
I agree. And I'll take it a step farther. One of the things you have to have, I think, to win, if you don't have this, you can't. If you do, you still may lose. You think he was good enough to be president of the United States for me. I'm governor of New York. I'll never be able to make a speech again. And even the cases that the grievance movement.
Trump doesn't. Nikki Haley sure doesn't. Max don't think anyone else.
That was going to be there whether it was him or not. And if it had been somebody who was more palatable, it may have even been a bigger wave.
I just don't think anyone else in the party right now captures that movement, energizes it, gives it voice the way Trump does. And Nikki Haley sure doesn't. MAGA does not like Nikki Haley. There are other leaders of the MAGA movement. But Trump is, I've often said, and I take heat sometimes for saying it, Trump's the second best presidential candidate I've ever covered after Bill Clinton. Better than Obama, better than Bush 43. And I say that because he is so unpopular. And yet he somehow has been able to win 2 of 3 and almost won the 3rd. Because he has an incredible high human intelligence level, an incredible fingertip feel for the mood of the country, and a drive to win that's vital. You have to wake up every day and say, what are the 10 things I need to do today to get elected president? And if one of the things on the list is you need to gnaw through the handcuffs that have you chained to a fence, you need to gnaw through the handcuffs. And Trump will do it. And I don't think there's any evidence that Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom will gnaw through those handcuffs. Maybe someday they will, but I haven't seen it yet.
Support for the Chris Cuomo project comes from
Stop. Bloody hell. I'm trying to run a high quality show here, guys. Bloody hell. It makes it so hard.
In this incoming administration to best improve their position?
Well, I'm not in the business of advising candidates or parties, so I'll say this. The point of politics is not more politics. The point of politics is governing to improve the real lives of real people. So I hope that at least in the initial days and months, they'll look for opportunities to work with the administration and the majorities of the Republicans in Congress to find common ground to make the real lives of real people better. Immigration, taxes, housing. There's a number of areas where I think that they could find common ground, and they should challenge Donald Trump, and they should do it based on ideas. Along those lines, I'd like to see all governors, including the Democratic governors, treat their states as what was called in the 90s laboratories of democracy, where they come up with innovative ideas that other governors can copy and can maybe make federal programs where that's applicable. I really do believe that we're better off if both parties look to be aggressively competing for the other side's votes. And that means the Democrats can't be the far, far left party that they've become.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't like progressives or I'm not interested in their ideas, but they've never been this left wing. They're substantially to the left of 1988 when Michael Dukakis lost.
Oh, yeah.
And Bill Clinton brought them back to the center with a range of more moderate positions.
Yeah, look, my father is, he was mentioned numerous times at this convention. This is not his party. That cat was all working class all the time.
Yeah.
And anything that had to do with money in the system, he's attacking everything he does and everything. We believe it's 700,000, but the political side try to collapse.
Military to help deport people in the Trump or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris.
Okay.
I agree with everything you said, Chris. You never once have heard Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris express outrage at people coming to this country illegally and committing crimes against American citizens. Never once. And most Americans are outraged.
Right. That's a great point. Right. You never hear Democrats talk about people who come to this country illegally and then commit crimes against American citizens. Right. That's a normal thing to be outraged about. But if you're not outraged about that, there's something quite weird about you.
Done a poll, but I bet if you did a poll and said, President Trump wants to use the military to help deport people in the country who've come illegally and then committed a second crime against an American citizen, I think that probably gets 75% support. And so for these, just as a matter of politics and policy, for the media and the Democrats, without knowing the plan, as you said, but even if that's the plan, to scream hysterically about what a horrible idea that is, seems to me kind of a mistake. Now, there may be civil liberties issues, there may be issues about the military that should be robustly publicly debated. But to be hysterical about something that, as you said, that hasn't happened yet, that would probably be popular, seems like a bad idea to me.
Yeah, and look, I get about not allowing the many, America's about not letting the many to overrun the few, but you can't do the reverse either. You can't have the interests of the few men that were waived in
by Vanity Fair, as happened. I think if you look at his, I hope none. I don't really know. I mean,
the question was, how many of Trump's opponents is he going to take revenge on now that he's president?
Never covered an incoming administration about which I had so little sense of what would actually happen. I think if you look at his personnel picks so far, it's mixed, as tea leaves, as clues to understand what his agenda will be like. He wants to go down in history as a great president. He wants to be loved by the New York Times and loved by Vanity Fair, as he always has. He wants to be on Mount Rushmore. He wants people to call him one of the all-time great presidents. And so can he do that if his administration's about vengeance? Can he do that if he's constantly at war with the New York Times? I don't think so. So I hope that as a lame duck, who doesn't need a whipped up base after his nominees are confirmed very often, I hope that...
Okay, chat asks, what's the worst vice everyone has that they wish they could stop but can't? I said Lost. Even at my age, Luke, yes, even at my age.
He won't do any of that stuff. And that the side of Trump that...
No. There are days where the amount of time I spend in Lost is so minimal, it doesn't even register. But then there are other days where the minutes that I spend lusting start to mount up way too high.
You and I have both seen that's one of the most gracious and fun people who...
But the problem isn't lust. The problem is I've gotten disconnected, and so my body and physiology are reacting with lust because I've got disconnected from real people.
Who isn't interested in anything but bygones being bygones. I hope that's who the president is. But I can't rule out that it's closer to the Heather Cox Richardson conception of Donald Trump, who will use his 4 years to, maraud through Washington and destroy the lives of those who he thinks wronged him.
What is your best advice for the media in covering
Harris accountable? Participation in a conspiracy with
for concerned citizens.
For the media, it's, as I said before, I think come clean on the failures of the last 4 years. The failure to the participation in a conspiracy with the Biden administration to cover up his loss of mental acuity. Analyze the qualitative and quantitative data that exists about how unequal the coverage was, particularly the failure to hold Joe Biden and Kamala Harris accountable, and the overreach on things like covering illegal cases against Donald Trump, which in some cases have some merit, but in all cases have fundamental flaws for the prosecution of a former president. So start by truth and reconciliation about the last 4 years, and then cover him aggressively, but fairly, and ask every day, is what we're doing fair? Is this the way we cover a Democratic president who did the same thing? Not harder, not easier. Those would be my basics. Purge the newsroom of liberals. Also would probably do that. We can't cover things fairly.
Be a lot
of empty seats.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of opportunity, a lot of open jobs.
Yeah.
We'd have a lot of migrants into the news business.
In terms of citizens, patronize the Chris Cuomos of the world. Give them your consumer dollars that reward people who want to cover the country fairly without regard to party or ideology, but who do things that are both interesting and important to hold all the powerful interests accountable to the public interest. Read a lot, listen a lot, be informed, be open to your neighbor's point of view, even if they support a different candidate. If you're on the left, don't be afflicted by Trump derangement syndrome. Don't tolerate people telling lies about Donald Trump when the truth is bad enough. Focus on the things that are true and worthy of consideration, strong pushback.
Okay, the importance of good nutrition, guys.
Is it a documentary too? Because it's the second one?
It is the second one. We put out a documentary 1 year ago. I was still living in L.A. at the time, and I came in on your show and talked about that. Now, that movie was so popular, Dennis, it was put out, it was distributed by Gravitas Ventures. It was the #1 documentary of all time that Gravitas has ever put out. It went worldwide. It was on every airline when you could still fly.
Wow, it's the #1 documentary all time from Gravitas. Whoa.
And it was everywhere, and it still is. And it became #1 last year on iTunes, beating out the very popular movie Free Solo. It also made it to #1 on Amazon Prime and across all the VODs that you can possibly think of. And it was so popular that I sat down and started working on Fat, a Documentary 2, where we really do a deeper dive. And if you think the first one was good, now this is me talking, and of course I made the movie, but everyone who's ever seen it so far said, Gravitas couldn't wait to get their hands on this. They actually cut a better deal with me. Now, where does that happen in life, where someone will go out of their way to cut a better deal to get your second movie? They can't wait to get their hands on this.
Well, I just wish this guy felt comfortable praising himself. I just wish this guy was at ease with stroking himself. I just wish this guy could make the case for the excellence of what he does. All right, let's talk Joe Rogan, Bret Weinstein, and standards in alternative media.
So that is the kind of thing that you rarely hear from the other people in the alternative media space. And I think that is a good sign and like a correct assessment of self-awareness about like what is distinguishing, right? Like just reading source material and acknowledging that you're not a world expert on things puts you way ahead of the curve.
Yeah. And I've heard him say similar things, I guess almost sort of downplaying himself and his success, really just saying, look, I'm really not that good. It's just I do slightly more work than the other guys, so it makes me seem like it. And I'm going to hand it to him too. He was calling out and expressing very strong suspicions that characters like Tim Pool were literally getting paid by Russians because he couldn't think of any other explanation for why they would be talking like this. He was making those points.
And why the talking points are so consistent.
Yeah, he was picking that up from a number of different media clips that he was covering. And he was right.
Yeah, so the alternative media, Matt, things that would fall into that remit would include Joe Rogan, who Lex Friedman was talking, perhaps the world's greatest conversationalist, recently had on one of the premier evolutionary biologists of our time, Bret Weinstein.
Moink. That's a smidgen of moo and a bit of oink, or
just to give you, a little taste, just a bit of a taste, just a taste as I think all they deserve of what went on there with, the great scientist and the conversationalist par excellence. Here's them talking a bit about, concerns they have about the election, Matt. They're not partisans, right? They're guys with concerns.
I coined this term, the Cartesian crisis. And the Cartesian crisis basically means the point at which you can't really be certain of anything. And the problem is, yes, I do think people are catching on to the fact that they never know the real story, but the response to that is either that you start believing the bullshit that they tell you, or that you just become cynical and stop believing anything. And neither of those are functional ways to exist.
And both those ways are good for the people that are running scams.
Exactly. They're good for the people who want to maintain power because it just keeps us back on our heels.
Yeah, because if you don't know what's true and what's not true, you're like, oh, geez. And then you get cynical, it's all bullshit, this whole system's rigged, then you just go fishing.
Right, and that's the thing people don't understand, is that at the point that you think you're striking a blow by checking out of their system, you're actually doing them a favor.
Right. It's actually beneficial to them because then you have a smaller number of people that are voting. So essentially in the 2020 elections, it was the largest ever win, right? The Democrats got 80-something million votes, which is, so let's say even if it was 50-50, so somewhere in the neighborhood of 160 million people. How many people are women and children? I mean, how many people are children? Women can vote. What am I saying? How many people are children, rather?
Oh, geez, I have no idea on the percentage.
Under 18. It's probably in the 30%, so that's a pretty high turnout.
Yes, if that was even
if it was real.
Yeah, that's the problem. We have no idea.
And that's the problem with the whole cynical game. Because I'm not convinced. You know why I'm not convinced? Because everybody wants me to be convinced. When they yell at you, if you ask a question, like, hey, one of the things that I've always said, and everyone sort of agrees with this. I mean, literally everyone, even people that think that the election was 100% legitimate. The percentage of voter fraud is never zero, correct? And they're always like, yes. No one can say it's zero. Right. It's not zero. There's a bunch of slippery people that get arrested on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, Matt. So, you can't know what's true. And like the election, voter fraud, if we can even trust the numbers that the Democrats supposedly won by. And what about this Cartesian crisis that Bret has coined?
Yeah, great rationale there, which is that if people are wanting you to believe that the election wasn't fixed, that makes him think it was fixed. It's great reasoning. So anyway, I mean, like you said, Chris, all of the sympathies go in one direction. All of the suspicion and the paranoid conspiracies go in the other direction. There's not much interest in actual conspiracies, like people like Tim Pool getting paid a whole bunch of money because, they're right wing. There's a lot of interest in this, like, it'll never go away, will it? Like, Trump has stuck the idea in people's minds that the election was stolen from him. If you don't get the result that you want, then it's got to be rigged. And people like Bret pick this up and run with it. And it's just that sort of Weasley kind of words. I mean, there is some truth in that in terms of one of the objectives of propaganda. They would say, for instance, communist propaganda during the Cold War or fascist propaganda is not so much to convince people of a particular thing, but rather to put them into a state of doubt where, nothing can be really trusted.
So these are a couple of academics. This bloke here, Chris Kavanaugh, he is from Ireland, now lives in Japan, married to a Japanese woman. This bloke here, Matt Brown, is a fair dinkum Aussie, but also married to a Japanese woman. He is a professor at the University of Central Queensland.
And therefore, you sort of check out politically. There's some truth in that. Other people have written about that. But Bret bends that to his own view because it's such a blanket statement that you can then go, well, we can't know anything for sure. So anything's possible, including stolen elections. It's very easy.
No, Matt, you're detecting a skew that isn't really there. Like, Joe is a free thinker. He doesn't have, biases. And Bret, he's a radical progressive.
I don't think we are wrong to imagine that we have lost the ability to check whether an election is fair and that's not an accident. That leaves the possibility open to cheat. And as you point out, they cheat in every other way. Are we supposed to believe that they won't do that because their patriotism is so deep? I don't see any patriotism to them at all.
Well, not only that, they've established this narrative that it's imperative that the Democrats win to save democracy.
Right.
So they've already made all of these statements that it's more important for them to win than anything. More important than anything. More important than having primaries. More important than letting the people decide who the representative is. More important than having live actual conversations, interviews that aren't edited on CNN. Instead, they have a 40-plus minute one that's edited down to 18 minutes. Like, what?
I mean, the irony here is that sort of talking point that I mentioned before about the one purpose of propaganda is not to convince people of a particular thing, but rather to just sow a kind of generalized doubt over everything and make people doubt everything. That's exactly Bret's shtick. That's exactly it, right? The irony is he's the guy doing the kind of propaganda that he's talking about, that making people lose trust in everything.
And he's not sowing doubt universally over everything. It's, same as Russia, which is like, yes, they throw out lots of stories and confusing half-truths and conspiracy theories, but they still have a party line that they maintain and enforce rigidly. And here, Bret and Rogan are just parroting right-wing talking points, right? They might occasionally throw a half-hearted attack about, the Republicans also have these kind of influences, but it's very clear. It's all about Democrats. They're the ones that are, they're doing sneaky things about the elections and they're editing interviews on CNN and all this. No talk about Fox or Tucker or, any of that. And in case you thought it wouldn't come up, Matt, the last clip I'll play from this interview, of course, vaccines feature.
And we just went through this with them over COVID.
Yeah.
We know that when they think they're in the right, they feel entitled to lie about everything. They feel entitled to coerce.
Right.
And so the idea that we're supposed to imagine that our elections are somehow different to them, I can't imagine how that would even work.
It doesn't make any sense. And it's one of those things, again, that you're forced into agreeing with just out of fear, because people get very aggressive with it. Just like people were super aggressive about the vaccine. I hate seeing people die because they made a poor choice. But there's something insane about how many people were pro-vaccine advocates that were shaming people and angry at people, and now they're dead. And they're not dead because they ran their time and they got old and they died and it's unfortunate, but it happens to all of us. No, they're dead young. A lot of people. Not one, not 20. We don't even know what the real numbers are because it's not something the mainstream media covers, because they've all been vaccinated too, and they're probably freaking the fuck out too.
Yeah, it's a huge number of people. We can detect that statistically. The trouble is that it's hard in any individual case to know whether or not you're looking at something that would have happened anyway.
Cavalcade of idiots.
Yeah. So Bret and Joe both living happily in their alternative reality where it was the vaccines that have been killing. Proven. Yeah, it's just a statistical fact. Loads of people are dying like that. Actually, the other thing too, Chris, is that Bret, as usual, is just the perfect illustrative example of how conspiracy thinking works. And did you notice his little argument there, which is extremely common, and it actually is one of the reasons why people, conspiracy theories are like Pringles. You can't eat just one. Once you're all in on the COVID vaccine conspiracy, then you've convinced yourself that there is no, there is nothing to which the powers that be will not stoop to. There are no lies they will not tell. So why wouldn't they lie about the election if they're going to lie about this? And if they're going to lie about the election, why wouldn't they lie about the moon landing, Chris? Of course they're going to lie about the moon landing. Like this is genuinely the reason why people believe they end up, when they go far enough down the rabbit hole, they end up believing basically all the conspiracies.
Yeah. And, so people often view the COVID as Bret's radicalizing conspiracy moment. But just to be clear, like, he was anti-vax, curious individual, and 9/11 truther before any of this. Like, if you just look at his output, and just today, Matty was posting out, I don't know what happened on 9/11.
Of course he didn't.
He was responding to someone, and he wanted them to be a truther person. But he doesn't know what happened on 9/11.
He's just
it's a mystery.
Just
Still
curious. But he's curious. He has questions. Yeah.
Yeah, he debated this with...
Oh, okay. So yesterday I played a little bit from Nina Power. She says that being a woman is easier. Fun interview on Aporia
also,
magazine.
Nina's my friend, as you will probably figure out as we get chatting. So Nina, you wrote a book called What Do Men Want?, which concludes with the idea that the time is right for an attempt at a general reconciliation between men and women. So what do you think has caused a rift between men and women? And is it a recent rift, or is it an ancestral rift?
I think something which was a playful recognition of differences, at least in some of the more beautiful cultures that we've had as human beings, was manipulated by people for malign ends, and certain divisions occurred simultaneously with certain forms of proximity that were exacerbated by the Industrial Revolution. So I'm a big fan of Ivan Illich, and there's many ways of telling this story, and I'm sure you have a more rationalist historical story, but let me tell it my way, which would be to do with a certain dissolution and erosion of separate spheres, whether that be to do with different roles, different...
So a great thing about traditional community is that you tend to have more separate roles between men and women. Also in Australia has more sexual segregation than any other first world country. In Orthodox Judaism, by and large, men and women are in separate spaces.
In forms of tool use, private, public sphere, all of those things were kind of eradicated quite a long time ago through technology. And in place of kind of sexual difference and various playful tensions between men and women, you instead had the rise of like the worker or the kind of human being. And let's be clear, like, there are no human beings, there are only men and women. But following the Industrial Revolution, you have a kind of becoming proximate of men and women. So men and women are basically doing the same kinds of work. We see this form of like sibling rivalry or competition all the time in contemporary life, where men and women are basically working in the same places. Their sex lives are more or less the same. Everyone's using the same apps. You might remember a moment when the Grindr was like the first sex app, and the speculation at the time was that heterosexual women would never go for an app because the model of desire it was based on was predicated on the idea of gay male sexuality. But instead, now everybody has the sexuality of a gay man, apparently. But I think this has caused a really rather unpoetic collapse in the relationship between men and women. But really what Illich was trying to do in that book was talk about this loss of difference. Like, once you eradicate separate spheres or any distinction between men and women, and he talks about...
So one of the great things about traditional life in general, Orthodox Judaism in particular, is how you get so many more divisions and separations in life, and you get more rituals. You have ways of honoring the differences between men and women, humans and animals, adults and children, holy time from secular time. It makes life much more exciting.
In all kinds of different cultures, in the name of a kind of economic system which collapses that difference, doesn't need the difference anymore, basically. So once men and women are basically that proximate, they're the same kind of person, they're basically workers, you don't need to make anything magical about the difference between men and women, and there's no more kind of rituals or dances or any of the things that used to introduce men and women to each other. And this basically, makes us dislike each other, potentially.
There's an amoral consumerism that panders to our basest desires, and there's a more or less, at least a debased capitalist kind of force that forces men and women to work for a living. So you seem quite anti-capitalist, both in this book and in your other book.
We live in the world of quantification, measurement, utility, exchange, and so on and so forth, right? So in a way, to be opposed to these things is to just render oneself pointless. But then I would defend that. I defend the useless and the pointless and the poetic and the beautiful, because I actually do, in all seriousness, I do think the values, the things that people ultimately care about, are not the things that dominate the world, that are not worldly. I think if you ask people what they care about, they'll talk about a particular person or their children. They'll talk about the love of where they live. They'll talk about the love of nature. They'll talk about art. They'll talk about their hobbies, especially in Britain. And so I suppose I'm interested in all of those things that fall outside of that which can be measured and exchanged. That's what
I mean, people don't want to say like, I love food and I love my car, I love my shoes. Like you're talking about loyalty is fundamentally a conservative and religious virtue, and without loyalty, you get groups that splinter, and you don't get anything cohesive. And and there's a lot of tolerance in religious communities. There are people you can't stand, and you still bring them food, and that's kind of a loyalty. That's not solidarity.
And I think if we reduce all ideas of truth down to this very narrow one, which is very effective in particular domains, we miss out on a whole range of anthropology, of emotion, of feeling. And even to give a kind of pragmatic answer, the ways of coping with the suffering that is attendant upon existence for everybody, in different degrees at different times, but we will all suffer. We all suffer grief. We all suffer heartbreak. We all suffer.
The idea that people are more sympathetic to men than women, but the opposite is true. Women are regarded as in need of more sympathy than men. So contra man. This is actually from a quote from an article that Bo Weingart and Corey Clark wrote. People are less willing to harm a female than a male. Women receive more help than men. Those who harm women are punished more severely than those who harm men. And women are punished less severely than men for the same crimes. There's some interesting stuff where if you say that...
So all this stuff about male privilege, and this is for someone who's basically had that experiment in their life, right? Which is a very rare thing to have. I mean, of course, it's anecdotal. Of course, it's a memoir. You could project all of your hate onto this group because these are white men and they're probably racist anyway, so screw them, like just creating new groups to hate. And so my policy with everything and anyone is to try to understand where people are coming from, and that would include far right literature, that would include like race science, that would include like literally any position. And I think that's the only kind of epistemically honorable thing to do, is to at least take arguments seriously in the first place before criticizing them. And that's just a basic philosophical premise. Like you steel man arguments, the principle of charity, principle of mercy, even.
I just love the idea of communal groups, supporting each other and living in solidarity, and not in solidarity. We just talked about how that's very flawed, but yeah, living together and helping each other. And I do think that it's amazing that in the United States so many people live singly, in their own apartments, even in tiny studios, so that they don't have to live with other people, because people find it so difficult to even live, to even share a kitchen or a bathroom here in the United States. And that's part of the reason why there's a housing shortage, for example. So I like this idea. So you say it's wrong to damn men as a group, essentially, or hold them morally suspect, but you're also gender critical and say that we shouldn't allow trans women, that is natal males, into women's spaces. Isn't that a kind of form of natural skepticism towards masculinity?
No, I mean, I would say that, first of all, it's not primarily necessarily a question of safety, but one of like truth. I think there's lots of obfuscation and sort of lying in this whole discussion. And so, for example, I think if men and women want separate spaces on the basis of sex, they should have them. Like, they don't even need to justify it, if you see what I mean. Like,
okay,
it's not, there doesn't even have to be a reason. It's just we want this space. And the same would go for men. So I think we should have a kind of like truth and reconciliation committee in which like women give men back whatever they want, and men give women back whatever they want.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, gentlemen's clubs can go back to
oh, okay, yeah,
this kind of thing.
Or
I
yeah.
think that there has been altogether too much mingling, which destroys this erotic possibility and play and all of that, and just like we just get bored of each other. But I do think that the kind of men who would actively want and enjoy sort of shocking or disturbing women in their own spaces are perhaps more dangerous by virtue of the fact that they want to do that. Like, who would want to do?
I mean, I think that men, some maybe 1% to 3% of men are psychopaths. Female psychopaths are fairly rare. Men are much more promiscuous than women. They're much more violent than women on average. They, if psychopathy is a spectrum, but psychopathy being lack of guilt or remorse, desire to shock people, then many more men fall on that spectrum. And so
discussion of virtue and to imagine ourselves as something other than ensouled and compatible and capable of making decisions and thinking that our lives are meaningful. And so all I'm really saying is that both men and women, in order to be truly adult, really, if you like, to grow up, is to accept a kind of responsibility that is partly attendant on our sex, and that it is better for everybody if we live with that natural knowledge, that knowledge of who we are. We're not reducible to it, but it is the basis for our existence. And for
so you kind of endorse sex segregation. I think sex segregation is wonderful. I've been in some female-only spaces on meditation retreats in religious contexts, like in temples and synagogues, and then also there was a psychedelic retreat that I went on that was women-only. So I think women's spaces can have very it's just one less thing to think about. That inherent difference between men and women. So you seem to be endorsing sex segregation as a way of kind of normalizing or traditionalizing in a good way male and female relations in the book.
Yeah, I mean, at times. I mean, for sure. I'm not saying like all the time, not like male planet, female planet, but yeah. And I mean, I do find there's something very interesting when I spend time with only other women. Like, I mean, some of it I find a bit scary because I spend most of my time with men, and I'm very used to certain kinds of discussion and ways of being, and I find being often with just women often quite overwhelming.
All right, Nina Power there in the conversation with Diana Fleischman talking about how being a woman is easier. Okay, that will do it for me. I'll talk to you